how I kind of got into this work. So my PhD was in computational modeling, the double integral work. And what we wanted to do was we recognized that, it was great. We had a lot of collaborators. So we worked with the University of Western Australia, and they would actually do the experimental work. And then we would work in our lab at the University of Tennessee. We would actually generate the computational models. And that was great. But I even knew that if I wanted to have my own research laboratory, I had to get this kind of experimental experience. So I worked with Dr. Brian Norton at the University of Kentucky, and there's his biomotion laboratory. And it was great because I finally got that hands-on experience to do experimental work. And again, keeping with the theme of ACL injury, he does a lot of lower extremity work, specifically ACL injury. He does patellofemoral pain. So people who are runners, that might be more common with them. But what was interesting about this is he was saying that, after you have this ACL injury, we often have these return to sport metrics. And so return to sport metrics are used to clear you to say, hey, you can get back to where you need to be. And what was interesting is these people were getting cleared to return to sports. But if you looked at their gait, it was really disruptive. So if the person here, they've had an ACL injury, their injured limb, if you can probably guess, is the one closest to us. And then their healthy limb is the one that's further away. And you realize that they're landing on their injured limb with a lot stiffer gait than their healthy one. There's a lot more give and compliance. So again, what was crazy to us is the fact that this person has been cleared to return to sport, but they're still having really large gait asymmetries. And that's something that we don't even have to measure. We can just visually see. So what we ended up doing is we started to figure out, well, we really have to fix this because, like I said, it makes sense that 44% of these individuals are going to not be at their previously functional levels, and then they're going to be greater risk for injury. And there's a whole long host of problems. So this was kind of the impetus for a lot of the work that we were getting into. So if we were going to kind of improve on these models, we had to figure out, we had to have a greater understanding of what the actual problem is. So in post-ACL reconstruction individuals, they typically have unresolved neuromuscular function. And what that means really is that they don't produce the right amount of muscle force, and they don't produce it in the right at the right rate. So again, if you think about going back to sports like soccer, and you're going to have to run, jump, and cut, if you can't produce enough force to support yourself and you can't produce the force in the right rate, you're going to have a problem. So what we did is we started to figure out, well, let's figure out what features or what variables are most sensitive to these changes that we know are associated with ACL reconstruction individuals. And we identified that they're going to be peak ground reaction force. So if you see over here, we have the vertical ground reaction force profile, and the peak force is the largest force that you generate. We also have the loading rate. And so that's how quickly you get up to this peak force. And then we had stride time dynamics. So over time, are you exhibiting the same kind of pattern from stride to stride? And why this matters is because there's really significant consequences to ACL injury. So if you're not producing the right muscle forces, you're going to start loading your knee differently. That's going to lead to knee osteoarthritis. And when we think about this population, about most of these individuals tear their ACL are young individuals. They're 16, 18, 20 years old. And the problem is that after you tear their ACL, if we don't correct this problem, 10 to 15 years out, you're going to have the knee that's radiographically similar to an elderly individual. So you're telling me that 30 and 40-year-olds are going to have the knees of 70 and 80-year-olds. So it's a problem.
You're telling me that 30 and 40-year-olds are going to have the knee that lets them know when it's about to rain?
Exactly. They're predictive, right? Yeah. It's all a predictive model. So it's really crazy that is what's going to happen. And so when we think about it even more so is if you have a knee and that it hurts, you're not going to be as physically active. So that also means that, you're going to put on weight, you're going to lead to cardiovascular disease. So there's really a lot of detrimental consequences of this. So our challenge was to say, can we first and foremost identify new standalone metrics that allow us to delineate between healthy and pathological conditions? And by standalone, meaning that, we have this healthy region of diagnostics. So if you go into a physical therapy office, we can get these measures and really quickly say, yes, you're in the healthy zone, or no, you need to go back to rehabilitation. So we start off when we did some autoregressive modeling. And we picked this because when we were looking in the research, when we think about gait, everybody's gait pattern is relatively similar, right? We all do the same kind of basic motion. We put a foot down, load it, and then take it off. So the general biomechanics of gait are similar, but it's the subtleties in this variance and the noise and data that we thought were going to be effective. So we thought that autoregressive modeling was going to be a great tool because it allowed us to kind of look at the the variance in the noise, essentially. And that's where we thought the gold and the good information was, right? So we looked at using the ground reaction force peaks, and we created a time series out of those ground reaction force peaks. And then we fit a second order AR model to them. And we liked the second order AR model because it did fit, just wasn't cool, but it fit. And it also allowed us to get this really nice visual representation of, where you are in this triangle. So the idea that if you had certain gait dynamics, you'd be in one region of the triangle. And if you had different gait dynamics, you'd be in a different region, right? And so we thought it was a really quick visual way to delineate between healthy and pathological gait. So one of the things that we haven't talked about, I keep talking about ACL injury. And the problem when you start on the lab is you have no clinical connections, right? So I couldn't get ACL individuals into the lab. So I was struggling. I was like, oh, we got a problem here. So what do we do how do we kind of create this pathological gait? And what we did is we have that instrumented treadmill, and we have we can control each limb independently. And so what we said is, well, let's disrupt their gait. And so what we did is we had one foot move at one speed and one foot move at the other. And then we thought that was pretty destabilizing. And we liked it because not only is it destabilizing, but we could control the magnitude of the perturbation. So we decided that a 0.25 meter per second difference between limbs was going to be a good one. And then we also did the 0.05 meters per second. So we did that. And first, so we had all these people come through, healthy individuals, and we had analyzed their gait, and they all resided in this one region. So this was symmetric walking, both limbs going at 1.0 meters per second. And they kind of clustered in this region. We go, great, that's perfect. And then we looked at this asymmetric walking with the 0.25 difference, and we go, these people resided in a different region. This is pretty good. And then we decided to push our luck, and we said, well, where's this other kind of 0.5 individuals? Where are they going to reside? And lo and behold, they resided in a different region. We got really excited because, not only could we identify a healthy region of gait biomechanics, but we could also figure out the subtleties between, if you have a 0.25 or 0.5 difference. And so this kind of gave us impetus to think, well, maybe you can start to not only delineate between healthy and pathological gait, but different types of pathological gait. So, maybe people with a hamstring injury reside in one region, people with ACL another, and people with patellofemoral pain another. So we got really excited by these findings. And again, just kind of summarizing this work, that it was great. We can have a healthy region, and then also we could have the subtleties of the different perturbations.